In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some more NHL trade rumors that come from a Sportsnet article where they reference one player on every NHL team they felt was most likely going to be traded this coming offseason. So today we're doing another edition of Sign or Trade, looking at some RFAs. We're looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. We'll jump into that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. So today's video is going to be very similar to yesterday. It's kind of like a sign or trade type of scenario. I'm going to tell you all the latest rumors around these players. We're going to analyze what the team should do. Should they sign the restricted free agent to a longer term deal, make him a big part of the team's future, or should they consider trading him rather than commit a lot of term and money going forward? So let's kick things off here with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, of course, we're going to look at two players in their case because they've had a little bit of a goaltending decision to make, and they do have two goalies that are both capable NHL goalies that are both restricted free agents, are both looking for new deals. Both certainly deserve an increase in pay over what they've been earning, but they're both at very different spots in their career. So let's kick things off with Matt Murray. Now, Murray's 25 years old, soon to be 26. His birthday's actually next week. Murray, of course, has been in the league for a while now. Got things kicked off with 2 Stanley Cups right off the bat to start his NHL career. He only had 13 NHL regular season games under his belt in his first playoff run when he ended up going into the playoffs as the backup goalie to Marc-Andre Fleury. Ended up taking over between the pipes and led the Penguins to a Stanley Cup. So he got a Stanley Cup ring before he was even technically out of rookie status. Of course, the following season, the Penguins went back-to-back, and again, Murray spent most of the time between the pipes in the playoffs, leading him to another Stanley Cup. Now, in the 3 years that have followed, his stats have been a little bit more inconsistent. His play hasn't been as good, at least not consistently, and he's also battled some injuries, including some concussions. So there's certainly a lot of question of whether or not Murray stays or Murray goes. Now, the other big factor with Pittsburgh is that we have an expansion draft coming up in about a year's time, and they could be in a similar predicament that they were this time last time we had an expansion draft for Vegas and could lose another goalie if they end up having to go through that again with both Murray and Tristan Jarry, who we'll discuss here momentarily, both under the team contract, under the team roster here. Now, Matt Murray, because of those Stanley Cups and being in the league a little bit more longer and having more games under his belt, is going to be certainly looking for a longer-term contract. Hard to say exactly what he'll get on an open market, but I would think somewhere around a 5, 6, 7-year deal for a decent amount of money. I mean, he may not be able to command the type of money we've seen guys like Vasilevsky and Bobrovsky, that $9-10 million range. I don't think he's up in that level, but I could certainly see it being somewhere around at least 6, if not 7 million, considering where things have been, except more so on his past. His recent play, not so sure that he really earns that. I mean, the last 3 years, especially this last year, his stats certainly have suffered. His save percentage has been down over the last couple of years, and his goals against has been up too. So clearly, I think he's been outplayed this past year by Tristan Jarry. So there's a big debate. Does Pittsburgh sign Matt Murray, commit a lot of money to him when they're already having a hard time up against the cap, which has likely caused them to make other moves, possibly lose other players off their roster, or do they consider trading him and build up some future assets? Now, one thing about the Penguins, they've been in win-now mode for a long time, and general manager Jim Rutherford will likely remain that way as long as Crosby and Malkin are being productive and still somewhat in their prime years. I'm not sure when their prime years are going to really end here because they're still putting up, tremendous performances even though they're getting a little bit older into their 30s now. And as long as those two guys are there and playing anywhere close, they're going to continue to go for it all the time. But because of that, they really don't have a very deep prospect pool. They don't have a lot of assets coming up through the ranks. One player that they did have that I thought had a promising future was defenseman Kalen Addison, and he was traded this past year as well. So the Penguins could get a good amount of future assets coming back in a Matt Murray trade. I know there's teams around the league that have been interested. Apparently, we saw rumors not long ago about the Avalanche being very interested in Matt Murray. Apparently, Sakic and Rutherford had talks last year during the offseason. So talks like that could resume, and there's been some other rumors around Murray as well. And he seems to get the short end of the stick around a lot of Penguins fans, having a hard time living up to the big shadow there left by Marc-Andre Fleury when he left the team. He was there for a long time, and even though Murray has 2 cups to his name, it just seems like he doesn't always get the respect from Penguins fans, and many seem to be ready to move on to Tristan Jarry this past season. So I guess we'll see. But if you're Jim Rutherford, do you sign Matt Murray to a big-time contract, or do you trade him, gain some future assets going to help with the team, and you're only doing that because you have confidence to sign the next guy we're going to talk about, Tristan Jarry? Tristan Jarry is a Canadian-born goaltender, 25 years old. Obviously, just a little bit under a year younger than Matt Murray, but of course, it took a little bit longer getting to be a regular NHL player. He's been with the Penguins organization for some time. A few years back, he was kind of looked upon as being a potential goalie of the future, and this was around the time that even Murray was getting his first opportunity. He was with the organization then, but Murray got the opportunity and ran with it, and Tristan Jarry spent more time in the minors, honing his craft, and really been up and down in the NHL over a few years, but this past year spent the bulk of the season in the NHL and really performed quite well over 33 games, had a solid goals against, a solid save percentage. Fair to say he played better than Murray and could be a much cheaper option for the Penguins to save some cap room and make him the goalie of the future by signing him to a contract. Now, obviously, Tristan Jarry doesn't have the cups to his name. He really only has one full-time season, being there for a whole year. So he's likely going to get a shorter-term contract for a lot less money. They might be able to get him on a 2 or 3 year contract, perhaps, maybe 2.5, 3.5 million. I'm not sure exactly what it would cost, but it's going to be a lot less than Murray, which would give them a lot more flexibility. They still have Casey DeSmith down in the minors, who at one point looked like he could be a capable backup. There's some debate over that now. He hasn't had the best year in the minors, but certainly could give him another opportunity, I guess. And Jarry and DeSmith could make up the tandem next season. If Jarry can play like he did this past year, then that will certainly go a long way to cementing himself, that they made the right decision. Now, of course, if the NHL is able to resume this 1920 season and we can get back and have a playoff run, whoever gets that opportunity in the net will certainly probably help decide this for Pittsburgh as well. Because if we end up in a situation that the NHL resumes, and let's say that Pittsburgh goes on another deep playoff run and one goalie over the other gets all the playing time and really shows that he's the man to be between the pipes for the Penguins, then that's going to very, very well influence their decision as well. But personally, if it were me, I would probably look to trade Murray just because of the cap problems, and given the fact that his play hasn't been as good in recent years compared to a few years back. And I would sign Jarry to the more affordable contract. I would make a move before the next season gets underway, so we're not in this predicament when the Seattle expansion draft comes around that we're going to lose another goaltender and not get anything in return. My cupboard is not very full if I'm Jim Rutherford for prospects and picks, and I'm looking at that saying Murray can help us restock that, and it very well could go a long way to keeping this team relevant, I think, at least for the immediate future, depending on what you can get back. So personally, that's what I would do, but I'd love to know what your thoughts down in the comment section. Now, let's move on and take a look at the Edmonton Oilers, and of course the player we're going to discuss is, no surprise here, Jesse Puljujarvi. Do we sign him? Do we trade him? Can we even sign him? Can Ken Holland even convince the guy to sign if he's able to go down that road, if he wants to do that? Of course, he was the 4th overall pick back in 2016. Many feel he was rushed to the NHL. Went straight, he's 6'4", 220 pounds. He's got great size. He's got NHL size. He should have NHL strength, but he just kind of floundered within the Oilers system. Didn't really play well, but you know what? Many feel that the Oilers kind of mishandled his development, and I do think to a degree there is some onus on the Oilers for that, but at the same time he's going to take ownership of his game and his development too, and I think there's probably fair to say there could be blame on both sides of the equation, and things just have not worked out. This past year he decided not to sign with the Oilers, went back, played in Finland in Liga, and had a tremendous year, gained a lot of that swagger back, showed he can be a top player in that league, gained a lot of confidence, and is certainly generating more interest. There's been a lot more rumors lately popping up that the Oilers are getting more interest from other teams to look at acquiring him, especially whenever it comes time to have the 2020 NHL draft. Apparently there's been some talk that there's some renewed interest from the Rangers and a possible Elias Anderson for Jesse Puljujarvi swap, kind of swap struggling prospects, get them a new fresh start, new home, see if things work out differently for each. I mean, that's a possibility we might see. I could see Puljujarvi possibly thriving in New York, but it's hard to say if 100%. We talked talked about Puljujarvi about a week ago. I looked at some different options and destinations for him. One was Ottawa, and really, as much as they might take a chance on him because they're rebuilding, they also have a ton of prospects in that position that could be coming up from Belleville and their American Hockey League team. They may not want another guy to add to that mix because they have a lot of similar type players already. You got a team like Detroit who's certainly rebuilding, and has a fair bit of picks. You get Montreal. It's hard to say where the best destination is for him and what the return would be for Edmonton if they go down that road. But can Ken Holland even possibly try to sign him? I don't think so. He's got his mind made up that he's not going to be an Edmonton Oiler and he wants out. I mean, it's been going that way for a year. I don't see things changing now. So personally, if I'm Ken Holland, I try to trade him. His value seems to be up. I think I'd trade him before the beginning of the next season, whether it be at the draft or sometime, they said, before 2020 gets kicked off, regardless of when that is, just in case things don't go as well for him in the next year when he gets a chance to play again. Trade him while his value is up, get what you can, cut bait and move on. That's what I would do if I'm the Edmonton Oilers, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Do you think there's any chance they could convince him to come back and give it another try, considering they had a new GM, a new coach, and a fair bit of different players since he was last there? Let me know your thoughts. And if he's going to be traded, and where is the best destination for him? Do you think Elias Anderson for Jesse Puljujarvi trade makes sense? Let me know in the comments and we'll discuss further. Now, lastly here, we're going to jump over to the Columbus Blue Jackets and Josh Anderson, another restricted free agent who's had a lot of talk around him about staying or signing and being a part of this team's future. Now, Anderson, of course, has had some contentious negotiations with the Jackets before. The last time he was an RFA, had a little bit of a holdout situation. So given Anderson's contentious past, I mean, it's hard to say exactly how negotiations will go this time around, although he is arbitration eligible this time around. So like, very well could change his fate and more likely to get a deal done. But Josh Anderson 2 years ago had a career year, put up 27 goals and 47 points. And then this past year only played 27 games, scored 1 goal, and was injured majority of the season. So there's certainly not a lot of good stuff going on this year leading into a contract year. I mean, he's got great size. He's 6'4", well over 200 pounds, can play a heavy type of game, can play a physical game, power forward style, and certainly not a kind of player that comes along every day. But the Blue Jackets certainly proved that they had a really solid year without him all year. So really, did they miss him out of their lineup? You could probably have a reason to say no, they didn't really. And many of their other guys have stepped in and scored at a good pace and kept this Blue Jackets team relevant and hanging around a potential playoff spot pretty well all year up until the NHL pause. So clearly, maybe they could live without Josh Anderson and they should consider trading him. But I guess at the same time, like we talked about other players, his value isn't super high right now. They could probably take advantage of that to get a cheaper contract. But at the same time, they may have to go with a shorter term that could end up walking him right to free agency. If he gets back to what he did last year, but with the Blue Jackets, and is on a short-term deal, then he may end up walking for nothing in a couple of years' time. It's hard to say exactly how that would go, but I guess you're kind of rolling the dice. Does Josh Anderson get back to that 27-goal type of player that he was 2 years ago? Or does he continue to be injury-riddled and struggle and, be a kind of contract that could be problematic for you in a few years' time if things don't get back to the way they were? I mean, he's still young. He's still big, strong power forward. Like I said, it's nice to have in your lineup. It also depends on the price and term that he's going to agree to. You could end up with a short-term contract if you go through arbitration. That is a possibility, but I do see the benefit here on both sides. I'm not really sure what the Blue Jackets should do because I think there's value either way, but they're not going to get a lot in return if they trade him. But at the same time, they've really depleted their draft picks and their prospect pool. A lot of the trades they made last year near the deadline when they were really going forward, when they picked up guys like Matt Duchene and Ryan DeZingle and made all those trades, they really gave up quite a bit. The pool at that point wasn't overly deep. They already had some picks off the books, and then they depleted it even further. So, they could certainly replenish that a little bit if they could get, a couple assets in return for a guy like Anderson. I know there was some talk if he was going to be able to return that he could possibly be traded around the deadline. There was a lot of chatter around this player, and it's not a given that Jarmo Kekalainen wants to go through another contentious negotiation and very well could end up trading his rights to another team, possibly at a draft time deal, depending on when the draft is held. I think there's a lot of teams against having an early draft because of the trades that they can't make. So we very well, if we see a fall draft or when a draft is pushed out later on when trades can be made, prime example of a player that could be moved at that time, possibly for either a first-round pick or multiple seconds or, a second-round pick in a player or something to that effect, and we'll see what happens. But let me know your thoughts on Josh Anderson. Do the Blue Jackets sign him? Do they trade him? What is their best move in this scenario? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.